All right, so welcome to our deep dive today
Yeah.
into Walden
Oh, Walden.
by Henry David Thoreau.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And we have here a fully annotated version.
Oh, nice.
So we're going to really try to unpack
Yeah.
everything that's going on with this.
Ooh, awesome.
I think it's a book that a lot of people have heard of, but
Yeah.
maybe haven't actually gotten into.
Sure.
So we're going to try to help everyone understand what it's all about.
Well, I think he's one of those writers that you
Yeah.
can just pick up
Yeah.
at any time and find something new.
Yeah, and be surprised, right?
Totally.
By how modern he feels.
Yeah, for
Even though this book was written over 150 years ago.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're gonna try to really figure out what the essence of his experience and his philosophy was.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, the first chapter is called Economy.
Right.
And this is where he kind of throws down the gauntlet.
Yeah.
He's talking about how we should be living simply.
Yes.
And he very meticulously goes through all of his expenses. So he built his own cabin.
Yes.
And he's like, okay, these boards cost this much and these nails cost this much. And he gives you a full accounting.
It's funny because it's a very detailed spreadsheet.
It is. Yeah.
From the 1840s or whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Who does that?
I know, but I think that was part of his point, right?
Yeah.
He was challenging what we think of as economy.
Exactly.
He was saying true wealth isn't measured by how much money you have.
Right.
Or your material possessions, but the richness of our experience.
Totally.
And our connection to nature.
Yeah, so he's redefining what success is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not the biggest house, not the, fanciest clothes.
Yeah.
But how much can you appreciate life?
Yeah, can you actually enjoy the moment that you're in and really live?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where his experience building the cabin comes in.
Right.
And using, found materials and just focusing on function over luxury or whatever.
Yeah, well, he even talks about when he was building it, he slept on a stack of bricks.
Oh, yeah.
As his pillow, which I always thought was so funny.
Yeah, it's that's hardcore, man.
But it really shows his dedication to this idea of simple living.
Yeah, it wasn't just a trend for him.
Exactly.
It was a philosophy.
A way of life.
Yeah, and it makes you think about okay, how much space do we need?
Right.
And what do we actually need in our lives?
Totally, and it's so relevant, right?
Yeah.
Because you see this with the tiny house movement.
Exactly.
Minimalism, all of that stuff.
Yeah, totally. And I think, one thing that Thoreau was really focused on was the sensory experience of being in nature, and especially sound.
Oh, totally. He was a master of listening.
Yeah.
He was so attentive to all the sounds of the natural world.
Yeah, so he talks about the bird song and the wind and the ice cracking on the pond, and it's okay, when was the last time you actually just sat
right
and listen?
I know.
Without your phone.
Right, exactly.
Or anything.
Yeah.
And it's that's kind of a lost art, I think.
It is, and it's so funny because even back then, he was already grappling with the intrusion of technology, right?
Yeah.
He talks about how he hated the sound of the train whistle.
Oh, yeah.
And he compared it to a screaming eagle.
Yeah, I love that.
So even then, he was aware of that.
Totally.
That tension.
Yeah. So he valued silence.
Yeah.
But he also really valued solitude.
Yeah.
And being alone with his thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he talks about spending a night in jail, and he says that he felt his house was more respected when he was locked up.
That's so interesting.
Than if it was guarded by soldiers.
Right. What a statement.
Yeah. So it's this whole idea of freedom, right?
Yeah. And it's not about physical boundaries, right?
Yeah.
It's the freedom of the mind.
Yeah.
The ability to think independently.
Exactly.
And to live according to your own values.
So it's it wasn't just a guy hiding in the woods, right?
Well, right.
It was this guy who was actively choosing.
Yes, exactly.
To be alone.
Yeah, to be with his thoughts.
With his thoughts and connect with nature on a deeper level.
Totally. And I think that's where the real value of solitude lies, right?
Yeah.
It allows us to step back from the demands of a world.
Yeah.
And reflect on what truly matters.
Yeah, exactly.
And connect with our deeper selves.
Yeah. And it's so different from our world today.
Totally.
Where it's constant connection, FOMO,
yes,
fear of missing out. And it's like, maybe we could all use a little bit more Thoreau-inspired solitude.
I agree.
You know? And then there's this chapter called Higher Laws. And this one's like really interesting.
Oh, yeah. Higher Laws is where it gets really interesting.
Because he starts to talk about this, like complex relationship between like our animal instincts and our higher aspirations. So like, you know, he loved nature, but he also struggled with like hunting and fishing.
Right. Yeah. He saw the beauty of it all.
Yeah.
But he also, like, you know, felt this unease about taking a life.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Yeah. It really shows the complexity of his thinking, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, he didn't shy away from those tough questions.
Yeah. Even
the ones that challenged his own beliefs and practices.
Exactly.
And, you know, it's so relevant today, right?
Yeah.
Because we're having all these debates about, you know, our relationship with animals and the environment.
Totally. Like veganism.
Yes, exactly.
And factory farming and all that stuff. And it's like, he was kind of ahead of his time.
He was. He was.
In that way.
Definitely.
So I think what he's doing is he's inviting us to like consider our own place in the web of life, you know, and to like examine our choices and like really try to like, you know, strive for a higher level of consciousness, you know, in the way that we're interacting with the world.
Yes. Totally.
And I think that's really like the essence of what Walden is all about.
I think so too.
You know, we were talking about solitude.
Right.
But he wasn't completely isolated.
No.
He still had interactions with people, right?
Yes. He had visitors. And, you know, he would talk to people from town and all walks of life.
And it's interesting because he seemed to be like really drawn to people who were like also living simply.
Yes.
Like he talks about this French-Canadian woodchopper.
Oh, right.
And how like, you know, this guy was super strong and self-sufficient and like lived off the land and was like perfectly content.
Yeah, he was like a real life embodiment of his philosophy, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like here's this guy who's actually living it.
Living it out. Yeah. And it's like, it reminds us that like wisdom can come from unexpected sources. Really? You know, it's not just like books and scholars. It's like you can learn from anyone.
Anyone, yeah, for sure.
And it also kind of goes back to this idea of like true wealth not being about material possessions.
Right, like that famous quote.
Yeah.
A man is rich in proportion to the number of things.
Yeah, I love that one.
He can afford to let alone.
It's so good.
Yeah, so it's this idea of simplicity and detachment can actually lead to a richer life.
Totally. Yeah. So I think it's important to acknowledge like the historical context here, right? So Thoreau was living in a time of like great social and political upheaval.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was like, you know, a staunch abolitionist.
Yes, very much so.
He actually like helped slaves escape.
Right through the Underground Railroad.
Through the Underground Railroad, yeah. So it's like this wasn't just a philosophical stance for him.
No, he was putting his beliefs into action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that adds another dimension to like his idea of solitude.
Right. It's not just about withdrawing from society. It's also about like engaging with the world in a meaningful way.
And fighting for like justice and equality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it challenges this idea that solitude is always selfish or isolating. Because for him, it was a way to like connect with his values more deeply.
Yeah, totally.
And then to act on them.
Yeah.
In a way that felt true to himself.
But it's also important to note that like he wasn't necessarily saying that everyone needs to go live in a cabin in the woods.
Exactly. He recognized that his journey was personal.
Yeah.
And that like not everyone needs to do that to find meaning or purpose.
Yeah. It wasn't like a blueprint that he was trying to create.
Yeah, for sure.
For everyone. Yeah. So it was more about like finding that space wherever that may be.
Exactly.
To like reconnect with yourself.
To reconnect with yourself. To be more deliberate in your choices.
And intentional.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of my favorite parts of the book is the pond in winter.
Oh, yes.
Where he like takes us beneath the surface of the frozen pond.
It's so vivid.
And it's like revealing this whole hidden world.
Right. He talks about the ice as like a window looking into the depths of a different world.
Yeah. And you can just feel his like sense of awe and wonder as he's like exploring this frozen landscape.
Totally.
But what I think is really interesting is how he combines like those poetic observations with like really meticulous scientific detail.
Right. So he was measuring the depth of the pond, mapping its contours, studying the ice crystals.
Yeah.
He was a true naturalist
totally.
as well as a poet.
And he also like reflects on like time and change in that chapter.
Right, like the thawing of the pond as a kind of rebirth.
Yeah. And it's like this metaphor for the cyclical nature of life itself.
Yeah.
And he even compares like the breaking up of the ice to like the breaking up of old thoughts and prejudices.
Yes, I love that part.
Yeah.
Like he's suggesting that nature's transformations can inspire our own growth.
Yeah, totally.
And renewal.
And so this idea of like constant change, renewal and rebirth, it kind of connects with his whole message of like living fully in the present moment.
Exactly, yeah, because time is fleeting.
Yeah.
And we should savor every experience. Yeah. You know, both the grand and the mundane.
Yeah, he says, time is but the stream I go a-fishing in.
Yes. It's such a beautiful image.
Yeah.
So he's saying that life itself is a journey.
Yeah.
And we should be present for every moment of it.
Every twist and turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's powerful stuff.
It is.
And it's like he's urging us to like not get caught up in the past or worry about the future, but to really like dive into the present.
Yes, exactly.
And experience it fully.
Yeah. And ultimately, you know, it's about that inward journey. Of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. Yeah. He wants us to explore our own inner seas. Yeah. You know. Totally. To live deep. Yeah. And suck out all the marrow of life. You know.
Yeah. I love that. You know, we've been talking about this whole idea of like self-discovery and connecting with nature and all that. But there's this one phrase that he uses that I keep coming back to. Yeah. Living deliberately.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about that a lot.
Yes.
And it seems to be like at the heart of his whole Walden experiment.
At the heart of it, yeah. It wasn't just about simplifying his life. It was about like aligning his actions with his values, being present in each moment, constantly striving for self-improvement.
So it's about making conscious choices, right?
Yes.
Like not just drifting through life on autopilot.
Totally. Yeah.
But what did that like actually look like for him at Walden?
Well, you know, he spent his days writing. Yeah. Observing nature, working in his garden, engaging in deep thought.
Yeah, he was like really intentional about how he was spending his time.
Very much so.
I love that image he uses. Yeah. Where he says, I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life.
Oh, it's so good.
It's like so visceral, so full of passion. It's like, come on, let's do this.
Yeah, it makes you want to grab life by the horns, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think it speaks to like this desire to really like experience life fully.
Yeah, engage with every aspect of it.
Yeah.
Find meaning in both the simple and the profound.
Yeah, and like, isn't that what we're all kind of searching for in a way?
I think so.
That sense of purpose?
Yeah, that feeling that our lives have meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something that resonates with us even today.
Totally. Right. Okay, so like, let's get real for a second. If Thoreau was like to time travel to our world today, what do you think he would make of it all?
Oh, man.
You know?
I think he'd be both fascinated and horrified.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you know, I think you might be overwhelmed by like the pace of life.
Totally.
The constant noise and distractions.
Oh my God, yeah.
You know, our obsession with technology. Yeah. Our detachment from the natural world.
He would not be a fan of smartphones.
No, I don't think so.
Remember how he was talking about like that train whistle?
I know, exactly.
Like interrupting the peace of Walden.
Right.
Be like, the constant dinging.
Yeah, he would not be on social media.
No, he'd be like, turn that off.
Right, put it away.
But I also think that he'd be kind of encouraged by some of the things he'd see.
I think so too.
You know? Like the growing awareness of environmental issues. Yeah. You know, people trying to live more sustainably. The interest in like mindfulness.
Yes, absolutely.
And self-reflection. So it's like, in a way, we're kind of circling back to some of those core values.
Coming full circle.
That he was championing, like simplicity, self-reliance, connection with nature.
Yeah. Maybe he was onto something.
Yeah, maybe he was right.
Yeah.
All along.
Who knew?
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Walden,
yes,
what is, like, the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
I hope they're inspired to, like, read Walden or reread it with fresh eyes. And just consider, like, how his experiment and simple living can inform their own lives.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, because it's a book that I think really does have something to offer.
I think so, too.
Everyone.
Yeah.
No matter where they are.
Yeah, for sure.
On their journey.
Absolutely.
It's beautifully said.
Thank you.
And remember, in Thoreau's words, it is never too late to give up our prejudices.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's all be open to new ways of thinking.
New ways of seeing the world.
Seeing the world, yeah. Let's embrace simplicity. Yeah. Connect with nature. And find our own paths to a more deliberate and meaningful life.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this journey to Walden Pond.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been fun exploring it with you.
Yes.
Until next time, keep seeking those deeper waters.